There you go, pal. See you in another year or so.
What did he mean by that?
Hey everybody, I'm back for yet another game review in my summer Ratchet and Clank marathon. Previously, I discussed Ratchet and Clank Going Commando, the second game in the series. That game is among the most beloved ones in the whole Ratchet series, and for good reason. It had exciting next-gen aesthetics just like its predecessor, an incredibly well-done story with that trademark cynical, satirical humor the series is known for, an amazing roster of weapons, and dozens of improvements to the formula, including a proper strafe, more plentiful bolts, along with more fun ways to earn them, and RPG elements to further encourage engaging with the mechanics. All around, it was awesome. If you recall though, I said it wasn't my favorite in the series because it still had a few minor issues that could have been used cleaning up in another game. Thankfully, a third game is exactly what we would get. Even though Going Commando didn't sell quite as many copies as the first Ratchet game, it too sold well enough to justify making the series a trilogy, which is how we got 2004's Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal. Yes, that is the title, and yes, it is hilarious. By this point, the series had proven itself as financially viable, so Insomniac had no doubts about making a third entry. Video game threequels tend to be more common than those for movie series, as developers often have a pretty clear vision of what they should do to improve in the third game. While maybe movie threequels aren't so uncommon because money, but you know what I mean. Ideally, the progression would go as follows. The first game introduces the concept, the second fixes what didn't work, and then the third refines everything to perfection. The perfect example of this is the Genesis Sonic games, where Sonic 1 introduces a solid concept though had some flaws, Sonic 2 added the spin dash and more exciting set pieces but still suffered from slight screen crunch and other small issues, and finally Sonic 3 and Knuckles takes everything those games did well and does them even better, with polished, expansive stage design, the best Chaos Emerald quest in the series, and hugely improved visibility. The definitive Sonic experience. Well, at least until 2001, but I'll keep my wrong opinions to myself. Insomniac Games knew exactly what they wanted to do for the third Ratchet game. The development process was a bit more interesting than the previous two, but I'll save that for later when it's more relevant. The result is the 2004 PS2 masterpiece, Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal. Yeah, I won't sugarcoat it. Up Your Arsenal is easily my favorite Ratchet game. To me, it's the definitive Ratchet experience, and whenever I think of the series, it's more often than not what comes to mind first. This game was always the most popular entry, and was the one that likely got tons of people into the series. I doubt every last person will agree with my assessment, as it seems to me like Going Commando is becoming the fan favorite one, but I don't care. This is my review, and I'm going to give my own thoughts on the game and why I consider it the peak of the series. I could totally see why someone would prefer Ratchet 2, but to me Ratchet 3 represents the apex of everything that makes the series so awesome. Is it even necessary to tell my story with this entry? It's quite simple. In March 2020, I had already played Ratchet 1 up to the final boss and beaten Ratchet 2. By now I could say I like the series, but still I'd yet to experience something that truly made me a fan. I then proceeded to play Ratchet 3 and it blew me away. Trust me, that seldom happens with any given game. I thought it was the most refined one yet, I found it hilarious, and in general it was pure fun from start to finish. Occasionally revisiting a game I had such a first playthrough with can lead to the shine wearing off somewhat, but this didn't happen when I came back to Up Your Arsenal in spring 2021, and again for this video. This series is one I knew I'd want to talk about on this channel at some point, and this game is one of the main reasons for that. Now it's finally here. I can share my enjoyment of this game with the world. Buckle up because we're probably going to be here for a while. This is my review of Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal. Enjoy. Just like Going Commando, the plot of Up Your Arsenal continues right where its predecessor left off. Again, I appreciate the dedication to making the Ratchet series an ongoing story. After Ratchet and Clank saved the Bogon Galaxy from the Protopet incident, the two stayed in the galaxy and have settled down in their Megapolis apartment. Between games, the duo have become celebrities of sorts because of their heroic deeds. They took up jobs acting for a Holovision series known as Secret Agent Clank. Ugh. I don't know why, but I just felt a bit of a chill from that name. Anyways, Clank acts as a secret agent, and Ratchet plays the role of his bumbling chauffeur named Jeeves. Embarrassed about this, Ratchet changes the channel, and immediately we get a very harrowing news report.
We continue our live coverage from Veldin. Just hours ago, the planet was attacked without warning by a terrifying alien race known as the Tyrannoids. Officials believe that an evil robotic supervillain known as Dr. Nefarious is the mastermind behind the Tyrannoid attack. As you can see, the Galactic Rangers are putting up a valiant fight, but they are no match for these tentacle-eyed terrors. Indeed, this backwater planet may be completely destroyed in a matter of hours. Darla Gratch, Channel 64 News.
Yep, Ratchet's home planet Veldin is once again under attack, this time by an alien race called the Tyrannoids. They're in league with a robotic supervillain known as Dr. Nefarious, who plans to eliminate all organic life so he can create a society of only robots. Sounds familiar, yes, but believe me when I say Nefarious is leagues better than Sigma ever was. Ratchet is once again filled with rage upon hearing about this, and decides he isn't going to take this sitting down. He prepares his ship for intergalactic travel, returns to the Solana galaxy, and makes his way to Veldin to put an end to the Tyrannoid assault. Personally, I find the pacing of this intro to be a little more digestible than the previous game. I didn't mention it in that review, but everything sort of happened pretty quickly and the pacing felt a wee bit rushed. Here, however, you still get into the action fast, but it felt paced a bit better. That's probably just me though. Upon arriving on Veldin, Ratchet and Clank meet up with the Galactic Rangers, who I guess were too preoccupied by something else to battle against Drek when he was terrorizing the galaxy. I don't know, maybe the organization was founded after that incident as a contingency measure of some sorts, but whatever, doesn't really matter. The Rangers make Ratchet their new sergeant and give him some weapons to help him in the fight. After they drive the Tyrannoid threat away, the Galactic President, another amazing character, informs Ratchet and Clank that someone they need is located on the jungle planet Florana.
On tonight's episode of Nature's Mysteries, we examine the Florana tree beast. Deep in the dense growth of Florana's Jambu forest lives a mysterious creature. Or maybe he doesn't. It's one of Nature's Mysteries!
I seen him run right through our camping site. He was buck naked, screaming and holding a banana. Or maybe it weren't a banana. It could be
one of Nature's Mysteries!
Which turns out to be Captain Quark. Being defeated in Ratchet 2 must have completely ruined him mentally, as he's now living among monkeys and even thinks he's one. The heroes then bring him to the starship Phoenix and meet with the president's daughter, Sasha, Ratchet's new love interest. A bit weird that Angela Cross is sort of just dropped from the story, but she wasn't totally retconned out of existence. It would have been cool to see these two get together as a couple since they're both Lombaxes, but I can hardly say this ruins the story for me. Anywho, the heroes then get a vid comic from Al at the Galactic Capital on Marcadia, which they use to try and jog Quark's memory. This ends up working, and following his recollection, Quark is put in charge of the operation to take down Dr. Nefarious. I'll once again get into this a bit later, but I'll just say this setup manages to produce some of the most entertaining cutscenes in the entire series. Alongside him, some returning characters like Al, Skid, and Helga help with the war effort. This team, known as the Q-Force, now has to travel to various planets across the galaxy and gradually take down the Tyrannoid army, as well as gather intel about Nefarious' battle plans. And when I say the Q-Force, I mean Ratchet and Clank by themselves usually. Like the previous games, there are several twists and turns, but we'll get to those when we get to them. For now, what I just laid out is the basic plot. In my last video, I said that Going Commando had the overall best structured plot in the series, and I honestly stand by that. The story just had a bit more intrigue right off the bat, and I found the twists that eventually happened to be overall more interesting. Saying that alone, however, would ignore how well written the plot of Up Your Arsenal is in its own right. The plot may be more straightforward than Ratchet 2 at first, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, Sonic Adventure 2 had a more streamlined story than Adventure 1, but it was still better because of the superior writing, pacing, and other such things. But there I go showing my controversial Sonic opinions again. Now what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Ratchet and Clank. Ratchet 3 makes up for its relative simplicity with by far the best character writing the series has seen yet. Again, I want to save this for later, but needless to say, this game takes the humor, wit, charm, satire, and character interactions of the previous games and cranks all of it up to 11. Like I said, the game also has its fair share of narrative twists that keep the story fresh and interesting throughout. These two games' plots are great for a few of the same reasons and very different reasons at the same time. By now, I've established that one of the key appeals of Ratchet and Clank is the plots and character writing, and another is definitely the standout aesthetics. Up Your Arsenal is easily the best in the series yet in this regard. The previous games look great in their own right, but suffered from a few drawbacks. Ratchet 1 was only in 480i and had this weird texture pop-up. Ratchet 2 fixed those things, but was a bit lacking in visual variety because of the overabundance of industrial and urban levels. Ratchet 3, by contrast, is easily the most advanced, varied, and gorgeous game in the series yet. Again, maybe the locales don't have quite the scale of Ratchet 1, but what is there looks extremely good. For one, the technical aspects are fully up to snuff. The game continues the baseline from Going Commando by supporting the PS2's progressive scan mode with component cables, as well as 16:9 widescreen. Those things are standard features now, but back then you'd be lucky if the game even had 480p mode. Most PS2 games were interlaced, and as a result haven't aged well visually, but Up Your Arsenal went above and beyond just like Going Commando, and as a result its visuals have aged like fine wine. Heads up, every bit of footage you're seeing in this review was recorded on a real PS2 and upscaled with the OSSC in this mess of a setup as usual for the best possible quality. This all cost more than I'd like to admit, but it's well worth it for the higher quality, making these old games look almost new. In general, Up Your Arsenal is easily the most colorful and visually engaging in the series yet. Previous games weren't totally lacking in this department, but sometimes made use of relatively dark colors, such as brown, gray, black, and others. In this game, the environments have seen a welcome boost in their palette, and overall appear far more vibrant. For example, you have the heavy greens of Florana, the deep blue ocean of Aquatos, the colorful painted walls of Hollow Studios, and more. Also, need I even mention the Obani Moons? On the whole, the increased color palette of this game is enough to make it my favorite looking in the series, but there's more to it than that. The art direction is well within the series quality standard, and may even be the strongest yet as well. This series is distinct because of its vast landscapes and creative visual style, and Ratchet 3 is no exception. I love the way these places look, including the capital city on Marcadia, the resort under attack on Koros, the movie sets of Hollow Studios, and the Super Mario Galaxy-esque Obani Moons. Speaking of the Obani Moons, it would be a massive disservice not to mention Obani Draco, or is it Draco? I don't fucking care. Quite possibly the most creative stage in the series. It's the HQ of Courtney Gears, so it's essentially a gigantic disco ball. It has vibrant colors, bright lights. I mean, just look at the footage in front of you. How can this stage not instantly draw your attention? It's things like this that make the Ratchet and Clank series stand out in a sea of otherwise samey looking platformers, and one of the many aspects that gives the series such a unique identity. On top of this, since we're in the Solana Galaxy, a few planets from Ratchet 1 make a return. They've all been given a facelift and look better than they ever have, and not just because of the 480p resolution. The locales have been redesigned and generally look a lot nicer than they did previously, with the broader color palette and higher poly geometry that Ratchet 3 has. If anything, it shows just how far the series has come since day one. If I had to nitpick something from this game's visuals, I guess there isn't enough enemy variety since you basically fight the same Tyranids the whole game. Sure, maybe, but that's splitting hairs at the end of the day. So yeah, the visuals of Up Your Arsenal are fantastic, and so is the soundtrack. Once again, legendary composer David Brigeau returns for this game with another amazing selection of music to enjoy. I've given high praise to these soundtracks thus far, and this game is no exception. Honestly, I'd still say the first game's unique musical stylings and supremely catchy composition make it my favorite soundtrack of the first three, but Ratchet 3 has its own solid collection of music alongside it, and breaks roughly even with Going Commando's music. Much of Up Your Arsenal's tracks have a more action-packed direction, going further into what Ratchet 2 initiated. This is quite fitting, since you're battling in a war that will determine the fate of the galaxy after all. However, some songs do bring in a welcome splash of atmosphere, with many perfectly blending that with the melody. There's too many great tracks to name here, including but not limited to On top of all those amazing tracks, Up Your Arsenal also brings back some of the best songs from Ratchet 1. As I said, a few planets come back from that game, so they of course use their music again. Typically, multiple games from the same series reusing the same tracks over and over again would get annoying, repetitive, and lazy after a while, but here I don't really mind since it's a one-time thing. Some songs are even given a remix. Take a look at Metropolis, for example. They add all these new instruments and backing tracks that really complete this song. On the whole, while I generally prefer Ratchet 1's soundtrack, this game has a fantastic selection in its own right. Another thing that's the best in the series yet is the weapon roster. I find the combat to be one of these game's strongest suits, and that's due in large part to the great selection of weapons in these games. One of the best parts of new Ratchet games is playing around with and getting a feel for all the new weapons they created, even if the archetypes are more or less the same as before. The first game did this quite well, though far from perfectly since some weapons were weaker than others. Going Commando had an overall more powerful set of weapons that you could also upgrade, but it still had one or two that weren't as useful. Up Your Arsenal's weapons are, as I said, even better done than the previous titles, and every last one of them is both satisfying and incredibly useful in a variety of situations. For starters, Ratchet 3 carries over the improvements that Going Commando made. You're able to upgrade your weapons as you kill enemies, and with each level comes an increase in damage, ammo, and possibly new properties. As opposed to Ratchet 2, where you can only level up a weapon once, Ratchet 3 has 5 levels for every weapon. I quite like this as it makes the upgrades feel much better paced, further encouraging you to use the weapons. Leveling up a weapon from V1 to V5 takes about as long as the upgrades from the previous game, but it sure doesn't feel that way. It seemed like one of them would reach a new level at least once per stage, and it's always satisfying to see that weapon level up screen appear during a fight, indicating you can cause even more destruction. The weapons themselves are so good that I find it difficult to list favorites, but I'll try. The Shock Blaster is a punchy shotgun weapon, the N60 Storm, which I refuse to believe isn't a phonetic reference to the N64, is a decent early game blaster. The Spitting Hydra lets you target multiple enemies at once and kill them all in one shot, which never gets old. The Agents of Doom are a nice reincarnation of the Glove of Doom from Ratchet 1, and the Annihilator is essentially the mini rocket tube, except far more powerful. My favorite new weapon in this game has to be the Rift Inducer though. It's essentially the bouncer of the new weapons, as it's easily the most powerful and all-purpose one. It fires out a rift or black hole or whatever, and it sucks all kinds of enemies in, including those huge Tyrannoid commandos that otherwise take multiple shots to eliminate. As you upgrade it, this effect only gets stronger, and at V5 the portals even shoot out lightning. However, it doesn't totally break the game in half, as it has a short range and limited ammo capacity. It also doesn't work on bosses or some types of big enemies, so you'll still have to use your other weapons to succeed. All in all, these weapons all have their use cases in a mostly even spread of situations. Definitely the most even spread in the series yet. Alongside this new roster of winners, Up Your Arsenal also brings back a few weapons from previous games. The Suck Cannon is back, although I didn't buy it because it costs a bit too much for what it is. No, the real highlight here is the return of some Megacorp weapons from Going Commando, sold by the returning Slim Cognito on a Quatos.
Well, if it ain't two of my best customers.
Slim Cognito? What are you doing down here?
I had a small run-in with the cops concerning a suck cannon upgrade that was mistakenly sold to a minor. I swear the kid looked 18. Anyway, I needed to find a less conspicuous place to do business. I take it you two are still in the market?
Well, let's see what you've got.
Normally these would just be a novelty and not much more, but Megacorp still pulls its own weight in this game, believe it or not. It helps that the weapons they chose to bring back from Ratchet 2 are some of that game's best, and it turns out they work wonders as much as the Gadgetron weapons in this game. I can't tell you how much I use the mini turrets, and the plasma coil came in handy on the final stage. Of course, the set of Megacorp weapons would be incomplete without, you guessed it, the bouncer. You don't get it until late in the game, but it still manages to be incredibly helpful, especially on huge enemies like these 20-foot tall robot guys, and crowds of small enemies like these Keemstars. I mean, Ninja Gnomes. I love that the Ratchet series rewards players for playing the games in order like this, and Up Your Arsenal undoubtedly does the best of all. The gadgets are also some of the best in the series, but unfortunately some aren't as grand. The one I don't personally care for all that much is the Hacker, this game's obligatory locked door opening puzzle thing. I've never really liked these things because they're usually nothing more than boring pace breakers that distract from the action, and honestly the Hacker isn't much better in this sense. The idea is pretty neat, and it's essentially a version of that old vector-based arcade game Tempest. Huh, that's the name of the fully upgraded Spitting Hydra. Interesting. Anyway, you shoot these red energy balls before they hit the top of the cylinder and collect the green charges. The problem is when they make you do more than one round, sometimes as many as 4 of them. It starts getting a bit boring by the end, since you're just sitting there doing essentially the same easy thing for several minutes. Also, you have to restart the whole thing if you screw up near the end, which could be frustrating to the right person. The Tira guys is another that I'm not too keen on. So you know the Holo guys from Ratchet 1, where you disguise yourself as a robot to sneak around security bots on Core 2 and Drek's fleet? This is basically that, except with Tyrannoids. Again, the idea isn't bad. The issue is that they make you do a really easy rhythm game to talk to the Tyrannoids and get them to open doors or lower force fields or whatever. It's just another pace breaker. Though the dialogue between Ratchet and the Tyrannoids is pretty funny.
Don't tell anyone, but I hid 5 bolts under this girder.
No.
Would you mind extending the bridge, sir?
You have no clearance. How do I know I can trust you?
Because I'll give you my sister's phone number. And I'm definitely not a Lombax.
Oh, why didn't you say so?
Haha. Look, if you let me through I'll loan you my Amiiboids Gone Wild holovid disc.
Hi ma'am. The red store is suit.
Of course. You won't believe what those slimy co-eds will do when the cameras are rolling.
That last one especially made me laugh. You're breaking into Nefarious' main base of operations as he's about to succeed with his plans, and all these idiots care to talk about as if some Holovision movie is director's cut or not. And when the guard finds out it is, he just lets you through like that, and you can then proceed to kill him to avoid having to follow up on your end of the bargain. Oh god, I love this game. Most of the gadgets are decent to pretty good, though, like I said. Every one of them that returns is as good as ever, including the gravity boots, charge boots, swing shot, and dynamo. Plenty of sections are built around the gravity boots, namely Obani Draco, and one near the end of Hollister Studios. The charge boots are also not locked behind an annoying minigame in this game, so I can actually provide an opinion on them. I think these things are pretty handy for the moments where you have to traverse a big open area, but are otherwise very risky to use, as doing so could send you into a pit. Additionally, the game uses the swing shot and dynamo quite well in some platforming sequences, the best example of which being this path to the gunship boss on planet Dax. I also quite like the idea behind the warp pad, but it's unfortunately only used on one stage, so some potential was wasted. My favorite gadget in the game is definitely the refractor though. The idea is similar to those laser puzzles from the Portal series. You have to redirect laser beams into receptacles to open doors or lower force fields. Sure, these puzzles aren't particularly difficult, but that doesn't change how fun and cool of an idea they are. The best section that makes use of this is easily on Obani Gemini, as it also incorporates some decent platforming and exploration around this small spherical moon, sort of like the jamming array from Ratchet 2. I only wish this thing got more use throughout the game and was mixed in with some other ideas, but what we do have now provides some decent set pieces that are a welcome break from the action in contrast to the door puzzles. Ratchet & Clank 3's writing, aesthetics, and weapon roster aren't the only improvements or steps up it makes from its predecessors though. No, this video has the title it does for a reason. I thought Going Commando already cleaned up the Ratchet & Clank formula quite a lot, so most of the improvements Up Your Arsenal makes are more so evolutionary than revolutionary, if that makes any sense, and generally boil down to quality of life changes. However, even if many of the improvements this game makes seem minor in the grand scheme of things, trust me when I say they all come together to make this by far the most fun Ratchet game yet, and the next time I replay the previous games, it may be hard to go back to not having them. The most minor of these improvements is that they now include a way to turn the camera and shoot simultaneously, the lock strafe control method. I like that they included this, but honestly I'm not a huge fan of how it was done. Whenever you hold a weapon, you're forced to strafe, which I don't really care for. I'm honestly so used to third person mode that I stuck to it for most of this playthrough. Thankfully you can map the different control schemes to the quick select, so you don't have to go to the options menu if you want to change control methods. Speaking of the quick select, that's also seen a giant improvement. Previous games only had one quick select ring to put both weapons and gadgets on, so it would often end up clogged and you'd have to choose some weapons or gadgets by pausing the game and selecting them from the menu. Up Your Arsenal gives you two quick select rings, which you can toggle between with R2 when bringing up the quick select with triangle. Needless to say, this cuts back on so much clutter in menu navigation, as you can now put weapons in the primary ring while offloading gadgets to the secondary ring. I have no clue why this wasn't there from day one, or at least in Ratchet 2, since it's such a no-brainer inclusion. Another no-brainer improvement is the ability to buy the maximum ammo for all your weapons at once. Going Commando already made it so you didn't have to buy every individual bullet, but you still had to purchase ammo for each weapon individually. In Up Your Arsenal, all you have to do is go to the vendor and you can just buy it all at once. Thank goodness for this, it cuts down on the needless fluff buying ammo had in the previous games. They also allow you to test out weapons in a VR training arena on the Starship Phoenix. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, the Phoenix serves as a sort of hub world you can relax at between major missions on other planets. It includes the armor vendor, the lounge where you can play the Quark vid comics, more on those later, and a weapons vendor from where you can test out the weapons. Viewers who have seen my opinions on hubs and other linear games may think I don't care for the Phoenix, but I quite like it and find that it fits the game's story. The galaxy is at war, so it makes perfect sense the Galactic Defense Force would have something like this. I personally never needed to use the weapon testing feature since this was my third playthrough after all, and I knew which weapons to go for, but it's still there for newcomers. It prevents them from spending their hard-earned bolts on a weapon they don't want, so even if it doesn't affect my experience, I still approve of its inclusion. On the topic of bolts, this game's bolt economy is also the best the series has seen up to this point. I swear, bolts themselves are even more plentiful, and I often earn tens of thousands on each planet. There's even a double points power-up, and that marks the second reference to Call of Duty Zombies in this review marathon. Yeah, this game has power-ups, including the 2x bolts one and the Inferno, the latter of which gives you invincibility and an instant kill melee attack, kinda like the Berserk mode from Doom. It's always awesome to get and looks rather badass. But anyway, you can earn double the bolts if you hit one of these green crates, so it's essential to hit them and go crazy earning bolts. On top of that, Ratchet 3 has numerous opportunities to learn lump sums of bolts, the best of which being the returning arena battles at Annihilation Nation.
Tonight on Annihilation Nation, we feature an all-new Death Course. Let's meet tonight's victim. Contestant, Fred. Fred is a Gadgetron accountant who claims he once had a Morpho Ray go off in his pants. What a champ! Let's take a look at what he's up against. Doesn't look too bad now, does it? Good luck, Fred! Next!
Yeah, that. It has both obstacle courses and arena shooter challenges, which focus on tricky platforming and combat respectively. I love these challenges. They're fun, reward you with a decent amount of bolts, and like Ratchet 2, they allow you to level up your weapons and health. Once again, playing into that masterful feedback loop the series has. Playing these challenges rewards you with weapon and HP experience as well as bolts, encouraging the player to engage with them and get even more out of them, as it increases their ability to do well at the main missions. It's genius, really. I also like that the arena has its own dedicated level rather than forcing you to ride that slow, boring taxi like in Going Commando, further encouraging you to use the arena. There's also the Sewer Crystal quest, which isn't as good as Tabora from Ratchet 2 because of its close quarters, but you do get more boats for each crystal, which is cool. I don't know, I didn't really use it much. Ratchet 3's best change in regards to the bolt economy is easily the removal of the paywalls. Sure, you lose out on the NPC interactions and a bit of the capitalist satire, but honestly those paywalls only serve to annoy. They basically meant you'd have a huge portion of your money arbitrarily taken away from you as you're trying to save up for a weapon or a new suit of armor. At least Going Commando increased drop rates and added tons of methods to earn bolts, but I'd still rather not have the paywalls in the first place. Up Your Arsenal, as I said, takes them out, and I honestly don't miss them at all. This offers so much more freedom of spending, and you won't have to worry about losing out on something you want to buy because some NPC wants a decent chunk of it. Admittedly, the reason for these things being removed is, well, as I said in the intro, I'll discuss it later, but even if Insomniac didn't necessarily remove them by choice, I'd still call it an improvement. The fact the galaxy is at war also somewhat explains the lack of paywalls, since most of the galactic citizens who would demand money are probably hiding or something, but what do I know? But those aren't all the improvements they made. No, really, there's still a couple more, though honestly they're more minor than a lot of what I just brought up. Remember how I mentioned the game brings back the swing shot and dynamo? I lied. Well, sort of. The game doesn't bring back those two items as separate gadgets. Both the swing shot and dynamo are combined into one item called the hyper shot. It seems like one of the main goals the devs had for this game was to streamline basically everything, and this further enhances that. It gives you more room on the quick select ring for weapons, allowing more loadout customization. Second, I like that your nanotech is now represented by a standard health bar. Sure, it's a bit more generic, but it's more instantly digestible at a glance. And that's about it. Man, how long have I been naming these improvements? It just goes to show how many steps forward this game takes. Yes, the previous titles were amazing, and I talked at length as to why that was in the last two videos. However, all of these little touches and improvements this game has just serve to make it even more fun on the whole. Anyway, I think it's about time we continue the story. Once again, some things change around a third of the way in. Upon reaching one of Nefarious's munitions factories on planet Dax, Ratchet and Clank come across the secret plans for a super weapon, which they find out is called the Bio-Obliterator. At first, it seems like Nefarious' plans were simply to destroy all organic life, but this discovery clues our heroes into the fact that he has bigger plans involving organics than previously thought. The duo search the planet for a bit more and are chased by a dropship, which they effortlessly destroy. In a secret building, they come across an editing station containing a music video from galactic pop star Courtney Gears, an obvious parody of Britney Spears. They enter another tournament at Annihilation Nation to meet up with her and get information about Nefarious' whereabouts. She tells Clank to meet her at Hollistar Studios that they want such information. The duo figure the director of the next Agent Clank movie wants them there anyways, so they decide to kill two birds with one stone. Ratchet ends up getting fired, while Clank goes through some filming and ends up with Courtney Gears at the end of the set. He asks her for information on Nefarious, and...
Perhaps now you will tell me what Dr. Nefarious is planning.
I have a better idea. Why don't you ask him yourself?
Clank is knocked out and taken directly to Nefarious' office, where he tries to convince Clank to join him in the robot revolution. Courtney Gears is also confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt to be evil, providing some social commentary on how celebrities may not be who they seem, like Quark did in the first game. We then follow Ratchet as he makes his way through Hollistar and meets with Clank at the end. However, something about him seems off, and it's implied that he was convinced by Nefarious to join the other robots. Okay, now the plot is getting really interesting. Not that it wasn't good before this point, but it's introducing some intrigue and mystery. Did Clank really join the dark side and start working as a double agent for Nefarious, or is something more complicated going on? Of course, the answers are revealed later on, but for now it's intriguing stuff that really gets the player thinking. Anywho, Skid McMarx turns out to be in trouble, and the duo make their way back to the Obani Moons and travel into the depths of Obani Draco. On a screen, they then see this happen to Skid.
Whoa! Like I never knew you were this kinky, Miss Gears.
Don't you ever shut up?
Okay, I'll zip it. Man, the guys aren't gonna believe this.
Like, destroy all squishies, dude.
Yep, it's revealed that Nefarious has technology to transform organics into robots, and Courtney plans to do the same to Ratchet. He then kicks her ass and reports back to the Q-Force, informing them about the whole roboticization thing because it's probably bad for the galaxy, if I had to guess, you know. They then track Nefarious down to the Zeldrin starport, so Ratchet and Clank make their way over there and meet up with Quark, where we get this, moment.
I thought we agreed to put that jungle business behind us. It was mating season. How could I have known she was your sister? How long have you two been standing there?
Too long.
The trio infiltrate Nefarious' huge ship, the aptly named Leviathan, and come face to face with him. However, he's one step ahead of the heroes and sets the ship to self-destruct. Quark stays behind to get something important he spotted, and so the duo now have to escape the ship Metroid style. Upon reaching the shuttle, Quark doesn't return, so the two are forced to leave him behind, and he seemingly dies. When they travel back to the Phoenix, the Q-Force holds the funeral for him, which is probably the funniest cutscene in the game.
He was really tall, and he had a unique fashion sense, and he had a really big chin with kind of a sort of a, well, you know, a butt shape. Well, you know, I think I've droned on long enough.
I just heard what happened. I wanted to offer my condolences to the team. Quark's loss is a true tragedy. The man was a hero, brave, honest, kind, and humble to the core.
What a load of bullshit.
I'm telling you, when I first saw Clank say that, I completely broke down into laughter. The pure dark comedy of him saying that at a funeral when the president is praising Quark is... I just don't know how to describe it. It absolutely ruined me and continues to make me chuckle on repeat playthroughs. Speaking of which, the cutscenes. I've been praising them throughout this review at various intervals, and now I want to talk about them in more depth. Long story short, I think this game's cutscenes are by far the best in the series, and the moment-to-moment writing and jokes are without a doubt the funniest it has ever seen. And this is still by Ratchet and Clank standards, a series that already had phenomenal cutscenes and hilarious writing even as early as the first game. On my first playthrough, I was blown away by just how hilarious I found this game. I'll put it this way, take the humor of the first two games combined, multiply it by Battle for Bikini Bottom factorial, and raise it to the power of Thousand-Year Door, that's probably only about half of how funny Up Your Arsenal is.
Yes, I did take calculus.
For one, the jokes and satire are quite possibly the best in the series yet. Whereas the previous games primarily satirized consumerism and unchecked capitalism, Ratchet 3 leans more in the direction of pop culture. Personally, I think this is a fitting direction for the comedy of this series to go in. Pop culture is closely related to consumerism, and is just as worthy as being ridiculed and satirized, if not more so. It primarily revolves around themes of fame and the corruption which that can bring, and how celebrities should not be trusted at face value, since they can be real slime balls when they're off camera, thinking they're better than everyone else just because they have a lot of money or a bunch of people who adore them, or both. I already mentioned the whole thing with Courtney Gears. On the surface, she seems somewhat innocent, something even Ratchet thought about her. In reality though, she's in legion with the very guy that's causing mayhem and endangering the lives of the citizens of the Solana Galaxy, and using her fame to spread anti-organic messages through her music videos. On the other hand, it's also shown that fame doesn't always corrupt. I mean, Ratchet and Clank are now intergalactic celebrities, what with saving 2 galaxies and starring in the Secret Agent Clank series. It's to the point that everyone in the game mistakes them for their characters, constantly talking down to Ratchet like he's actually Jeeves or something.
Is that Secret Agent Clank?
Greetings, sir. We are here to help.
Well, this is an honor, and I see you brought your chauffeur along.
What? No. Hold on a second, sir.
Agent Clank, we must stop Dr. Nefarious. Agent Clank? You're even more impressive in person than you are on the holovid. And I must say, I've never seen a chauffeur fight like you do, son. Who says you can't find good help these days, right, Clank? Sasha's told me a lot about you. Don't get any ideas, kid. She is way out of your league.
He's an unemployed rocket mechanic who claims to have saved 2 galaxies, but most people know him as Secret Agent Clank's bumbling chauffeur. He hopes that disguising himself as a tyrannoid will make him more attractive to the ladies.
Hey!
It's really funny because of how Ratchet reacts. It also plays into my point about this whole thing about how fame can change how certain people are viewed. However, Ratchet and Clank obviously don't let this get to their head, and they remain heroes ultimately dedicated to protecting the greater good of the galaxy. Again, fame doesn't necessarily corrupt, it all depends on what kind of person the celebrity themselves is. And just because someone has a positive reputation doesn't mean they should be automatically treated as such, as they could be completely unworthy of that respect below the surface. But enough about this philosophical, political shit or whatever. What really makes these cutscenes so hilarious is definitely the character interactions. Oh boy, now this is something I've certainly made a bit of a point of in the past. Just a bit. I'll tell you what, an easy way to sell me on comedy and jokes is to make these jokes revolve around an incredible cast of characters just bouncing off of and bantering with one another. And Up Your Arsenal accomplishes this with flying colors. The main cast is on point as usual and easily make their best appearances here. The whole Q-Force angle is played up so well. It's so damn funny to watch this cast of absolute morons interact with one another, only made funnier by the fact they do literally nothing for you. The mere idea of Ratchet having to put up with Quark to save the galaxy makes me laugh, and it's always funny to see Quark draft up plans where Ratchet does literally everything while still trying to make it seem like he's the one who should receive all the credit.
First, Ratchet and Clank will descend to the sea floor and wade through a series of tunnels flooded with waist-high raw sewage.
What?
Please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. After infiltrating the base, our agents will split up. Clank will enter the base's ventilation system where he will locate and deploy this banana-guided autonomous monkey device, or the GAMD. Meanwhile, Ratchet will use his extensive knowledge of the Tyrannoid language and customs to win the trust of the bloodthirsty alien guards. Finally, our agents will make their way to Nefarious's personal office, steal everything that isn't nailed down, and exfiltrate the base completely undetected.
The other members of the Q-Force, Big Al, Helga, and Skid, are also at their best. Skid is clearly stoned throughout the whole game, and is so zoned out to the point of hilarity.
I would have been here sooner, but I encountered some heavy-duty resistance.
Enemy troops?
Well, not exactly. The drive through a Galaxy Burger was wicked slow, and...
Anyway, looks like that last moon is surrounded by an Omega-class disintegration field. Whatever's going on out there, it can't be good. If I had the right tools, I could hack into that generator and shut the field down.
Hey, lucky for you dudes, I brought this. Stand back, bro. I'm like a trained professional and stuff. Don't try this at home. Oh man, it's busted.
Helga continues to insult the heroes and they just take it up the ass, which is even funnier than them returning fire like in Ratchet 1.
Well, you certainly took your sweet time.
Hey, it's good to see you too.
And Al speaks with a bunch of technobabble that I actually somewhat understand. I don't know whether I should be glad or feeling really hollow about that. Thanks a lot, Computer Science College.
Impossible! I ran a recursive checksum on the signal matrix. Hey, there is a feedback loop. Yes. Ooh. Omega-class asymmetric encryption. Finally, a challenge worthy of my skills. Oh, by the way, we found something interesting in Quark's quarters.
Hey, if it's another crotchetizer, I don't even want to...
In addition, there's the Galactic President, who's a not-so-subtle parody of then-recent US President Bill Clinton. He also had some of the funniest lines in the game, if you ask me.
Mr. President, how will the attack on Metropolis affect your chances for re-election this fall?
I'm glad you asked, Darla. Our demographic research indicates that robots will make up 100% of the galactic population by this time next week. Now, of course, that's great news for my re-election campaign because, as you know, I'm half robot myself.
Yeah, I know I've been showing a lot of clips, but can you blame me? These cutscenes are just so awesome and I can't help but show them. And I hope the examples given are enough to convince you. That all said, I still haven't fully discussed one of my best characters in the series. Of course, I'm talking about Dr. Nefarious. This guy is a riot, seriously. Without a doubt, my favorite villain in the whole series. He's an absolute nutcase that's completely off his rocker, and that leads to some moments that are consistently able to make me chuckle, even on my third time playing the game. Some people might roll their eyes and say he's just a guy who screams a lot, but that is an incredibly nuanceless way to look at it. Yeah, Nefarious has dramatic outbursts, but they aren't just screaming for the sake of it. It's always in service of some other joke. For example, whenever a character says something that pisses him off, particularly his assistant Lawrence. The dynamic between these two is actually very similar to Yuko and Mai, and that is the first time anyone has ever made that comparison in the world, I'm sure. Lawrence is relatively calm but still messes with his boss and loves to poke his buttons, while Nefarious reacts with absolute insanity. All of the scenes involving these two make me laugh, such as this one.
That's for you, Agent Clank. I have far grander plans for you. All right, Lawrence, you can turn it off now.
And this one.
Auto-destruct sequence initiated. Prepare to die.
Lawrence, teleport us out of here.
Of course, sir.
Lawrence? This isn't funny, Lawrence!
Or how about this one?
Zap! Lawrence!
Oh, dear, that was your audition for Galactic Idol, wasn't it? My mistake, sir. Dreadfully sorry. By all means, sir. Carry on.
Okay, enough with the clip show, you get the idea. Nefarious is quite the character, and I can't get enough of him. At the end of the day, though, he's a bit of a goober, but he still manages to be an effective villain who gets things done. He's just totally batshit insane on top of that, but as I said, it's in a really funny way and never comes off as annoying. And also, his quirk, where he just freezes up and just plays the most cliche love dialogue you've ever heard, is hilarious, okay? Holy god, this review has been going on for how long now, and I haven't touched on the level design, one of the most essential elements of a platforming game. That just goes to show how much more there is to talk about with this game. Anyway, let's talk about the level design. Up to now, this series has had awesome stage design that really brought up the most of the mechanics. It's been equal parts combat, platforming, and exploration, elements which played off of each other masterfully. Going Commando seemed to go a bit further in the direction of linear combat sequences because of its improved control system, but still had a lot of the other two elements. Up Your Arsenal goes even further into the direction of combat, and somewhat downplays platforming and exploration by comparison. However, I'd actually argue that this game has more of those two other elements than some may lead you to believe. I won't deny that Ratchet 3 does lean more into being a third-person shooter. A lot of levels boil down to relatively linear sequences where you fight enemies. When I say it like that, it may sound boring, but trust me when I say that is far from the case. The combat itself is refined to perfection in this game, due in large part to the amazing roster of weapons I praised earlier. It's fun as hell to blast these enemies to pieces, and the game even gets rid of that mildly annoying quirk where multiple enemies spawn out of thin air in Ratchet 2. What keeps it interesting is the challenge, which gradually and naturally increases as the game goes on. In the first few stages, you fight weaker foes who go down in a few shots, whereas they toughen up by the end and require a lot more effort to take down. By the last stage, they can obliterate you in only a few shots with the highest regular armor upgrade, forcing you to exercise extreme caution. All in all, this game has some of the best combat in the Ratchet series, which is great because I always consider that one of the strongest parts of the series anyway. It also has its fair share of platforming and exploration, more than some people credit it for. I already mentioned Dax and Obani Gemini as examples earlier, but those aren't the only ones. The most concentrated pure platforming in this game is easily the Annihilation Nation Death Course, which asks you to avoid fire, jump across wide gaps and with moving blocks emerging from the wall like it's Whomp's Fortress or something, and traverse sections with falling platforms. Quark's hideout also has a segment where you have to jump over lasers, and Obani Draco sees you making tight jumps between fireballs. The game also features its own version of the giant bolt quest, the Titanium Bolts. These are once again hidden within each stage, and force the player to explore to find them. I managed to find a few, but still nowhere close to all of them. The people who complain about the linearity clearly never even tried this quest, as it opens up a new dimension to the level design and even includes tricky platforming sequences every now and then. Sure, maybe it isn't quite to the degree as the previous titles, and again I will concede that Up Your Arsenal places more stock into combat. That said, I will wholeheartedly disagree that this makes the game boring or a huge departure from what made the previous game so great. It may feel somewhat compromised, and again I'll reveal the reason for that in a bit, but it isn't so scaled back as to feel cut down. This game still has all the ambition and high points that the previous games had in abundance, and I'd even dare say those things are at their best in this one. This game, like the previous ones, also has a huge attention to detail. For one, I love how the galaxy truly feels like it's at war. The constant combat actually does play off well with this, and further convinces the player of the dire straits the galaxy is in. Traveling to the various planets, dispatching foes, and gathering information pertaining to Nefarious gives the feeling of being a commando going on missions. Even more than the game title Going Commando, come to think of it. Despite the lack of NPCs, Solana's general culture is further explored, particularly from the perspective of how these people handle wars and fighting, as well as the whole celebrity worship angle I went up to earlier. I especially like when you get to travel back to some of the planets from Ratchet 1 and see them from new angles, or get to explore new locations. Ratchet 3 also has a few references to past games. I mentioned the return of some Megacorp weapons, but there's also the return of the plumber in one of the greatest brick jokes in gaming history. I showed that Going Commando clip at the start of the video, and once you reach the Aquato sewers, you meet him again where he delivers the payoff.
Oh, it's you two again. Right on schedule.
See, now that's how you do a fourth wall breaking gag. Sonic Colors? Take notes. However, best of all is when you get the employee discount. So do you remember when Ratchet met with the Gadgetron CEO in the first game, became an employee, and asked for his employee discount? Let me jog your memory.
Do I get a discount on gadgets now?
You have to be with the company for 2 years before the employee discount kicks in.
Yeah, employees have to work for the company for an entire 2 years before they get their discount. Well, in the game that came out 2 years after that one, you can finally get that discount if you have a Ratchet 1 save file with the Hollow Guys on it, which I do from a couple weeks ago at the time of writing. That's That's genius. Another amazing example of a good fourth wall joke, and a testament to the series' attention to detail. As per usual for this series, Up Your Arsenal features a few alternate gameplay elements. It doesn't have any races or ship segments, which I honestly think is welcome, since those things only served to break the pace in previous titles. They at least plan to include racing, as the Annihilation Nation announcer mentions the Florana circuit. There's also this cursed beta cutscene which just... something seems off about it, you know?
Dude, I totally would've won, but my hair got in my eyes.
Anyways, the two types of Clank sections return. Giant Clank is easily the best he's ever been, but still nothing super fun. You play as him during one short section on Hollow Star Studios, and it's really easy and kinda boring. I guess I'll take this over the drawn out Giant Clank bosses from Ratchet 2, but they probably could have cut this and not much would be lost. Standard Clank sections also come back, and are also better than they were in the first two. You're still funneling gadget bots into holes to progress and generally walking around really slowly. These at least have a little more depth in this game with the stealth angle and scrunch the monkey puzzles, but it's still nothing super fun. A little better than these is the Galactic Ranger missions. Every now and then, Ratchet and Clank will be able to team up with the Rangers and complete a few missions. These usually involve turning bolt cranks to activate turrets, defending an area from enemy attacks, or taking out certain foes. Occasionally, you'll even take control of a turret or gunship to destroy a few waves of enemies. A few of these are optional, such as the ones on Tyrannosis or Kerwan, and others are required, including Marcadia, Rilgar, and Iridia. I wouldn't call these mission sets awful, as they still allow you to level up your weapons or health, and they have bolt rewards, even on the mandatory missions. However, I wouldn't say they're my favorite parts of the game by any means, since they can still be mild pace breakers. The main reason for this is how repetitive they can be. You'll be in the same small map for multiple missions, mostly just killing enemies. Each one typically involves multiple waves, and while I like the combat in this game a lot, it admittedly gets a bit old after a while during these parts. It's a mild shame that Blackwater City and Iridia are solely dedicated to these missions, and it would have been nice to be able to explore them as full stages. Also, I don't care for the optional missions. I tried the one on Tyrannosis, died immediately on it, and noped out of that one. I don't know, I just didn't feel like doing it, and it would rather play the fun parts of the game, which is basically everything else. I get why they would include these mission sets in the game, given that it has multiplayer revolving around shooty action on these small maps. It's like how Sonic Adventure 2 included those 2 kart stages as a means of having the multiplayer driving gameplay in the main story. However, I'd still say they distract from the otherwise fast action in this game in a somewhat unwelcome way, and I'd probably rather not have them. There is one minigame that I outright love and consider the Ratchet series' best side gameplay though. These are the Quark vid comics. I've mentioned them in passing here and there throughout this video, but every now and then you'll receive a VG9000 cartridge for one of the 5 episodes. Going to the Phoenix's living room lets you play them, and they're essentially a game within a game. These vid comics tell the backstory of Captain Quark, and contain some of the funniest cutscenes in the game.
However, no previous adventure could have prepared Quark for his encounter with the dread pirate Blackstar and his crew of... Oh, please tell me this is a typo.
That's robotic pirate ghosts. Guess reading wasn't your subject, eh, Professor?
Right.
It turns out Quark has fought Nefarious before, and is the entire reason he's a robot who hates organics in the first place. The vid comics themselves all take the form of a brief side-scrolling platformer levels with heavy similarities to the Mega Man games, interestingly enough. Ratchet always came off as a 3D version of that type of gameplay to me, and this sort of clues me into the fact that maybe it wasn't just a gut feeling. I mean, Nefarious literally jumps like Chill Penguin or something. Anyway, these are simple but still really fun. The platforming is well done, has an old school charm to it. Quark also handles well, has some fun weapons to use. All around, these sections are a blast. They also net you a bolt reward upon completion, yet another way to earn some extra cash. Easily some of the highlights of Ratchet 3's gameplay for me, and it mops the floor with all the other minigames from the series. I don't know if that's a controversial take, but it's how I feel. At this point, what can I say? This is an incredible title that I plainly love to pieces. I've been praising it throughout this review, and everything I've said is my real true-to-life opinion. However, there's still one breadcrumb I've been building up to, mentioning it every now and then when the situation calls for it. One last loose end to tie up before wrapping this thing up. So do you remember how at the beginning of this behemoth I mentioned that the development process of this game was more interesting? And later on how I brought up a reason for why the level design was slightly compromised and why things like the NPC interactions were cut. This probably won't come as a shock to anyone who's even remotely familiar with this series, but yes, the unfortunate truth behind this game is that it was rushed. Following those first 2 games, Insomniac wanted to further up the ante for the 3rd game. They got even bigger and more ambitious than the series already was, and truly wanted to push the series to its limits. Sony, however, wanted the game to have a fleshed out multiplayer mode that used the PS2's online functionality. I've never played the multiplayer mode for obvious reasons, but from what I've seen, it doesn't look too bad. Most likely, it wasn't quite Mario Kart or Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, but probably still fun. That said, it was definitely the most significant contributor to the game's rushed development. I'd imagine making this multiplayer alongside trying to polish the Ratchet formula was a huge challenge for the devs at Insomniac. With how ambitious it already was, some things had to be either cut or scaled back, which results in a few of those odd things I've mentioned in this review, like the lack of racing and ship sections as well as the heavier emphasis on combat and somewhat more linear level design. By no means, though, does the fact that this game was rushed say anything about its overall quality. Despite this, the game still manages to feel as grand and epic as the previous ones. A lot of people like to bring up that Miyamoto quote, "A delayed game is good eventually, but a rushed one is bad forever," or whatever it was. In some cases, you could say he was right, as plenty of games over the years have been rushed out to market with no care for their quality, a practice which still continues to this very day, I might add. That said, he was absolutely wrong in many others. Rushed games are not always guaranteed to be bad. All it means is that the developers need to work a lot harder to make something good. I can point to several examples of this: Super Mario World, Super Mario Sunshine, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, many Sonic games, even some of my favorites like 3 Knuckles or Adventure 2, Spyro 3, Crash Twinsanity, you name it. All of these games share one thing in common: they were rushed to varying degrees and either had huge changes made in development or had tons of cut content. But I still consider all of them to be decent to good, and some might even call masterpieces. If you ask me, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal deserves a prominent spot on this list. It was definitely rushed, as some aspects feel a bit weird when compared to previous games. It had some cut content, and overall Insomniac wasn't able to implement every last thing they had planned from the start. However, even with those limitations in place, this game still manages to feel ambitious and rich with content. It's very much a finished game with a lot of fun and replayability to offer in its own right. In fact, I think it has those things to the greatest degree in the series thus far. Just like its predecessors, I didn't want to stop playing this game. It's so much damn fun throughout that I never wanted to put the controller down once. In fact, I didn't. Out of the first 3 games in the series, this was the only one that I beat in one sitting for these videos. What helps with that is the absolutely stellar finale, which in my personal opinion is the most engaging and exciting climax the series has ever had. Well, at least out of the games I've played thus far, which is just the PS2 and PSP entries. It all starts when Ratchet and Clank go to Metropolis, the first place Dr. Nefarious plans to attack with the Bio-Obliterator. It's here we find out that the Clank we've been traveling with since Hollow-Star Studios is in fact not the real Clank. Turns out the real Clank stuck to his morals in the face of Nefarious' temptations, and was replaced with an evil version of himself known as Clunk. Ratchet's been traveling with him this whole time and just never knew. After we find out about this, Nefarious launches his Bio-Obliterator attack on Metropolis, turning the Tyrannoid enemies into much harder robot versions of themselves. Once he reaches the Bio-Obliterator and Nefarious, Ratchet instantly recognizes that he's been fooled with Clunk, and now has to do battle with him in a kinda shit boss fight. I once again haven't mentioned the bosses for this review, but honestly they're not half bad and easily the best ones in the series so far. I especially like the Mama Tyrannoid and Courtney Gears, fights which feature fun patterns to dodge that are decently challenging in a fun way. Clunk, on the other hand, forgoes this standard and is a boring bullet sponge that gets rather tedious quickly. Thankfully, you can speed the fight up with the Annihilator, but it can still be annoying to die to him, which means restarting the long fight. It's only one boss though, so it doesn't ruin the game or anything stupid like that. After this, Ratchet and Clank go to inspect the crash site of the Leviathan on planet Zeldrin, during which they discover that Captain Quark isn't dead after all. Yep, like the coward he is.
Watch it, buddy. I mean, don't get fresh with me.
Quark fled to Q-Force. The heroes then go to Quark's HQ on the Thran asteroid, following a brief detour to aid the Galactic Rangers on Iridia, and meet up with him in his office. Quark tries to explain himself by saying he fled to escape death, for which Ratchet drops a harsh reality check after all this time of having to deal with his nonsense.
When I escaped from that star cruiser, cheating death by mere nanoseconds, I suddenly realized something very important. I could have died! Me, Captain Quark! Imagine an entire galaxy with no more me! And for what cause? So, a few trillion people get turned into robots. Who am I to say who should or shouldn't be turned into a robot?
You're pathetic, Quark. I can't believe I once looked up to you. Let's go, Clank.
That's all you need. This guy was who Ratchet was looking for in the first game, and now he doesn't have any time to waste on him. He has to go stop Dr. Nefarious, who is about to succeed in transforming the galaxy into robots. After all the douchebaggery, this is incredibly satisfying to say the least. On their way out, Clank informs Quark that he has one last chance to redeem himself and become the true hero he always wanted to be. Anyway, as soon as the duo make it back to their ship, they get word that the starship Phoenix is under attack, which is instant tension, just add water. They rush back to it and fight their way through hordes of enemies and now on board in a pretty stressful stage. The visuals and music really sell how dire the situation has become, to say the least. Ratchet and Clank eventually reach the control center, and Al reveals that he was able to crack the encryption on Nefarious' data disking the heroes gave him earlier. The battle plans within state that the Bio-Obliterator is about to launch from planet Koros, and upon hearing this, the heroes storm the base located there and use the giant orbital defense turret to blow it to smithereens. However, this still isn't the end. The heroes receive word that there was a second, much stronger Bio-Obliterator on planet Mylon, Nefarious' main base of operations, and its next target is Ratchet's home planet Velden. As you can expect, this fills the Lombax with rage, and he becomes determined to storm the base and blow the shit out of the superweapon in Nefarious himself. The duo get into their ship and immediately travel to Mylon for the final assault on Nefarious. But not without picking up the plasma coil first on Aquatos. Can't forget that part. Oh boy, let me tell you, this level does not fuck around. It's without a doubt one of the hardest stages in the entire series, and even more difficult than Velden in Peril from the first game. The enemies have quick attacks that hit like an 18-wheeler, so you'll have to go all out to survive. Not to mention, you have to beat the stage in one go, since there's no checkpoint until the end when you reach the final boss. Personally, I've gone back and forth on this stage. On my previous playthrough, I had a really rough time and died a lot, but on this run, I actually managed to clear the whole thing without dying once. It's probably just me getting better at these games, but regardless, I'm not complaining. The enemy damage was maybe a bit much given how far back the checkpoint is, making this a steep difficulty spike for newcomers, but it's nothing that's impossible if you put in the effort. Keep trying and eventually you'll beat this level. If I had to recommend a strategy, use the Rift Inducer on these huge Noid commandos, and for the enemies on ledges, use the Annihilator or Plasma Coil, since they have a longer range. In general, pay attention, avoid enemy fire as much as possible, and you'll make it through just fine. Maybe that isn't the most helpful advice in the world, but hey, come on, I'm trying. Once you make your way through the command center, you finally reach Nefarious himself, and he attempts to escape. When that fails, because Lawrence, he decides to fight Ratchet on his own, thus beginning the final boss. In the previous games, I was never a huge fan of the final bosses. Wreck went on too long for its own good and got tedious and draining by the end, and the Mutant Protopet was the exact opposite in that it was too easy and short. Dr. Nefarious, on the other hand, is an exciting, action-packed, and challenging showdown for all the right reasons, and goes on just as long as it needs to. He's no pushover, and I died multiple times, but I didn't care. His attacks are perfectly dodgeable, and the fight puts the movement and combat skills you've been building up throughout the game to a proper last test. Even if I had to restart a bunch of times, I never got frustrated because it was a blast relearning Nefarious' patterns and honing my skills with each attempt. Not to mention, this boss is the perfect climax. The game has been building up to this moment, and you can finally get in there and kick Nefarious' ass once and for all. As you fight him, the Galactic Rangers also come in to help, which just makes it feel like everything is coming together in the end. And do I even need to mention the music? Simply incredible. It really feels like the climactic battle of a huge war, like you've pushed back Nefarious' troops as far as they can go, and are now engaged in one last desperate assault to finally eliminate him and save the galaxy, bringing peace to it once more. Once you drain Nefarious' health bar, Lawrence appears and transforms the Bio-Obliterator into a gigantic mech. The two villains warp into the cockpit and immediately try to finish Ratchet off with the mech's huge arm cannons. Right before we can do this, though, yeah, Quark comes in and saves them. He actually took what Clank said to him to heart, and has decided to make it up to the Q-Force by helping Ratchet and Clank take down Nefarious. Pretty satisfying after what he's done to these guys in the past, isn't it? There's one more phase to the final boss where you control a gunship and shoot down the Bio-Obliterator, and to be quite frank, it's a bit anticlimactic because of how easy it is. Oh well, this climax has basically been pitch perfect otherwise. Nefarious is now defeated, and he attempts to warp out of the mech with Lawrence. However, Lawrence, being who he is, does this.
Lawrence, engage the teleporter.
Would you care to specify a destination, sir?
Who cares? Just get us out of here. Time's up. What? That wasn't even close to 60 seconds! Bye-bye.
Immediately after, the main cast is seen attending the premiere of the new Secret Agent Clank movie, alongside all their major and some minor characters from the PS2 Ratchet games. An incredible note to close the game on. If this were the last Ratchet game ever made, which it very well could have been, it would be a perfect finale. The plot threads from the previous games are wrapped up well, and there was a general air of finality to it. I'm glad this series did continue. All I'm saying is that if it ended here, it would have been a satisfying conclusion. Holy fuck, this was a long one. By far the longest review in this summer Ratchet and Clankathon, but I wouldn't have it any other way. After watching this behemoth, you're definitely well aware of what I think of this game. Too long didn't watch, Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal is without a doubt my favorite Ratchet and Clank game, and it's the culmination of everything that made the series so great up to this point. I like basically everything about it, and I guess besides a few minigames and gadgets that occasionally break the pace, that's really it though. Otherwise, I love the story and cutscenes, the weapons, the amazing soundtrack, the fantastic visuals and art direction for each planet, the combat and level design are as strong as ever, the Quark vid comics are great fun, and so much more. I think this game is a masterpiece, and regardless of it being rushed because of the multiplayer and the level design being slightly compromised as a result, it feels like the ambitious next step for the series. In my opinion, is its magnum opus. Out of all the Insomniac games I've played, which includes Spyro and Ratchet, this one is definitely my favorite. In fact, I'd also call it my favorite PS2 game, and a serious contender for my favorite game from all PlayStation consoles. It's fun, hilarious, and has tons of replay value, among many other things that make it so awesome. Above all else though, it takes everything that the first two games did and does them all even better, refining the formula to perfection like any great third entry does. And given the circumstances the developers dealt with, it's impressive just how good they were able to make it. They aimed high with this game, pushed the PS2 and the series to their limits, and totally nailed it. I love Ratchet and Clank 3, and while it may not be everyone's favorite in the series, especially nowadays, it sure is mine. And that does it for Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal. Truth be told, being able to air out how I feel about this game was one of the main reasons I decided to do this Ratchet and Clank marathon in the first place, and it feels great to finally do so. I've always liked the previous games, but this is the one that truly solidified me as a fan of the series. However, while this game could have served as the perfect ending to it, we would get one more entry from Insomniac on the PS2 with Ratchet Deadlocked, released 1 year later in 2005. That game is both similar and quite different from the games I've already talked about, and in the next video I'll be exploring exactly why that is. I think it will make for an interesting episode, so be sure to stick around if you want to see what I have to say about that game. In any event, thank you so much for watching this review. I've been Diamond Miner Studios, and I'll see you in the next one.
Now what?
I don't suppose you can play drums.